People certainly love their electronic devices, and in many ways they serve us wonderfully. But for a number of years, I've been offering warnings. Digital media, particularly when advertising driven and combined with machine learning algorithms, put us at significant risk. And importantly, no malevolence of intent is required. In particular, I've written about how these risks manifest with addictive dynamics. Creative systems theory ties the modern addiction crisis to our modern crisis of purpose. The aspect of the addiction crisis that I find most troubling, at least when I look to the long term, is not addicting drugs or the obesity epidemic, but addictive dynamics that involve our electronic devices. People are finally beginning to recognize that social media are having two-edged consequences. And just a bit, people are seeing that the problem may be deeper than just misinformation. As part of this, people are acknowledging that addictive dynamics may be real and doing real harm. Appreciating how addictive dynamics work supports this conclusion. Addictive substances hook us by providing the feedback that accompanies real fulfillment, feelings of excitement, power, connectedness, while requiring none of the vulnerability demanded by the real thing. Too often, social media, by offering electronic substitutes for real fulfillment, mimic the mechanisms of addiction. It has been a dirty little secret of high-tech companies, now becoming much less of a secret, that they were optimizing algorithms for these addictive effects. But it is critical to recognize that we would see addictive dynamics even without this being the case. The social media business model depends on maximizing the number of eyeballs and the amount of time eyeballs stay on a site. In the end, addiction is a much more reliable way to hijack our attention than providing content that actually benefits us. A related consequence of such dynamics is that social media algorithms inherently create distortion and fake news. It has been well documented that the soap opera of sensationalized content and outright lies is much more likely to attract eyeballs and much more likely to trigger search algorithms than real information. Part of the reason that I have before raised concerns relates to the harm these results produce. Nothing is more precious and central to meaning than our attention. And as I have written about extensively, nothing is more central to making our way effectively as a species than a deep connection with purpose and truth. Keep going as we have, and the inevitable result will be ever more powerful digital designer drugs. Another part of the reason is that there's no obvious way to counter these effects. George Orwell, in his dystopian novel 1984, warned of Big Brother taking control of our minds. The real danger in the future may not be government manipulation, but artificial stimulation masquerading as substance and information being used in ways that ultimately disconnect us from real importance. An important related dynamic is also beginning to be better recognized. Social media algorithms and just how they work exacerbate social and political polarization. Very intelligent people are setting off alarm bells about this effect. Some are describing it as a primary driver of modern social division. I think of it more as exacerbating more fundamental processes that had already been well underway. But I do find it a major concern. Again, this dynamic does not require malevolence and easily sneaks up on us. Every time we make an online choice, the record of our choice then influences the kind of information that is sent to us. This might seem benign enough, even helpful. We only get the kind of information that we have interest in. But it also means that different people increasingly receive different information. We are being pushed more and more into silos of belief, and that belief becomes ever more extreme and ideological. We don't need Russian or Chinese hackers to set us against one another. We are doing it with our everyday online behavior. Such dynamics undermine our ability to think with the sophistication needed to address the essential questions before us. I've emphasized how challenges of all sorts are requiring more systemic, more all-the-crayons-in-the-box responses. And more immediately, they threaten the coherence of the social fabric and the societal structures that we have traditionally depended on. Arguably, they put the democratic experiment at risk, certainly when placed in the context of destabilizing forces already at work. They have this result. Like with addictive dynamics more generally, there is again no obvious way to counter these effects. Simple laws or changes in policy would not have the desired result. Limiting the collection of information or limiting the use of algorithms that amplify content, those things would be of some value, but doing either would significantly reduce profits. The only option if social media companies really wanted to accept the needed responsibility would be to give up their advertising-driven business model, which we are exceedingly unlikely to see. Combine basic addictive dynamics with such exacerbation of discord, and we get a deeply troubling, difficult situation. People who are familiar with my work know that I go out of my way not to sensationalize. But I am comfortable saying that of the multiple issues that today have potentially catastrophic implications, including weapons of mass destruction, climate change, and the risks of major pandemic, dynamics related to the misuse of digital technologies have the highest likelihood of being the end of us. Here we are being confronted with a first wave of this kind of new challenge, which leaves us with the obvious question of just what can be done, if there is anything that can be done. The best the technology gurus have to offer of a solution beyond the kind of limited fixes I have noted is that something needs to happen at a cultural level. On that, I think they're right, though it is an observation that too easily lets technology companies off the hook when it comes to responsibility. And being that what ultimately needs to happen, at least as I see things, ties so directly to cultural maturity's changes, having change happen quickly enough to be of benefit is a major concern. What treating any kind of addiction ultimately involves points toward the needed prescription. When I work with someone who is addicted to, say, something like heroin, successful treatment inevitably comes back to one thing: helping the person find real significance to replace the pseudo-significance the drug has provided. The person can then see how the drug has been hijacking their life and robbing them of the things that in fact most matter. Better choices then tend to follow. With addiction of any sort, that task is to find a real reason to just say no. The parallel at a cultural level brings us back to what I have described as the concept of a modern crisis of purpose. Arguably, if we are going to let go of social media pseudo-significance, we must better find deep meaning collectively, find ways of thinking and acting that are authentically compelling and that can sit in clear contrast to these imposters. If we can do this, The fact that we can't get rid of damaging effects solely by legislation or policy may not have the dead-end consequences we might imagine. We need to create enough contrast in our daily lives that social media of the harmful sort get regarded as having little more significance than the afternoon soaps or professional wrestling. I think of this sort of prescription as having both personal and institutional aspects. At a personal level, we need to engage the kind of psychological changes that come with cultural maturity. To the degree we can, the fact that we are being exploited and manipulated should seem increasingly obvious and unpalatable. More institutionally, we need social structures able to engage the important questions before us with the needed maturity. One of the most striking characteristics of contemporary society is the degree to which we have lost trusted agents. We must work together to establish and support sources of information and institutional structures that we can count on. People hearing this psychological, social sort of prescription might reasonably object that we really aren't up to this task, and they might be right. And they would certainly be right to say that these changes in themselves would not be enough. They would need to result in major shifts in policy. But what if what I'm suggesting is not basically correct? We have real problems. We could be seeing our human tool-making cleverness leading us to our doom. My point is simply that there is a possible way forward, and as I've described in earlier episodes, the basis for that possible way forward, cultural maturities needed growing up as a species, is as potential developmentally built into who we are. We need to appreciate both that the task is considerable and that at our best there is the possibility of successfully engaging it. From a culturally mature perspective, this prescription, what asks a lot of us, becomes rather common sense. Again, your thoughts appreciated.